There are 1,000,000 ways to die. We just wanna talk about it. Codeheads.
Boy, that theme song does not get old to me as far as I'm concerned. Love it.
Hopefully not our viewers.
I know, they're like, "Oh god."
Again.
But how could they? We love it so much. So, we're, kicking on our theme of, the history of CPR, history of medicine, and what has brought us to where we are today. And so today we wanted to jump in and talk about Leonardo da Vinci, because I
Huh.
think
Mhm.
we're gonna get wild. He is
That's
a
random.
It is random, Mike. He's,
Okay.
really known as a quintessential kind of Renaissance man. And that he has made these profound contributions to the understanding of human anatomy. And his his art has had some, lasting implications for medicine and medical education. But his work was really unpublished during his lifetime, and it only gained recognition like centuries later, so after
Yeah.
his death. And so it's really wild because people know him as an artist, but they don't always know his impact on the medical world. So I'm going to toss it to Mike because this is one of his favorite topics.
It is. So who would have thought we're talking about Leonardo da Vinci? Like you said, most people just think of him as the painter, the Mona Lisa, the Vitruvian Man. When you see the guy like this, my favorite lady with an ermine, Last Supper. So what else did he do? Was he just a painter? No, he was not a painter. He sketched flying machines. He was an anatomist, as you said. He was into hydraulics. He created, cityscapes. So he
Sculpted.
didn't just have some interest. He had an insatiable doesn't even cover it, curiosity. He was a meticulous note taker, many of which we have today. He always wanted to learn something. One thing he wrote down, which really speaks to, I think, his essence, is describe the tongue of the woodpecker. He wanted to learn about the texture of a woodpecker's tongue. Why? Because he was curious. That's all it was. He dissected human and animal bodies, and we talked about human bodies on Body Snatchers last time, and this was not exactly encouraged, and we're talking in the 1500s now. He designed war machines, bridges, hydraulic systems. He watched water flow for hours. He was obsessed with water. He studied the clouds, how birds fly. So thousands and thousands of pages of notes, so many, and mostly he did that on mirror writing, and he just documented everything that he was curious about.
Could you,
But
not to
yes.
jump in here, but could you imagine if he was alive right now and he had an iPhone? I mean, I feel like that's what my brain does. Like, I go to bed at night and I'm like, the woodpecker's tongue really spoke to me because I feel like all of these random thoughts. And then I'm like deep diving and Googling these ridiculous things
Yep.
for no other reason than to scratch an itch in my brain.
Yep.
Could you imagine if he was alive today? Like everything
Yeah,
that,
but think about this though. When we have a wonder, it's answered pretty much immediately. I could
yeah,
find out the texture of a woodpecker's tongue right now, in a few minutes, and I'll know a lot about it. Where he had to
probably all thanks
ponder.
to him. Yeah.
He had to ponder, which I think really almost fed more curiosity, because when you ask a question, it brings about another question. Without an immediate answer, it makes your brain actually work for it. So there could be benefit to that. I would say, like, I won't go off about the iPhone right now, but yeah, if he had the iPhone, he would never sleep.
Well, and actually, you know what? We probably wouldn't be a lot of the places that we are today without him and others like him in history. So I sounded like a fool, but it just like tickled my brain because I'm sitting there thinking like, could you imagine? Like, but I guess there are people equally as smart that do different things, but the
Right.
pondering would drive me probably bananas. Although I guess we had to ponder when we were kids. We had like a really outdated
Yes.
Encyclopedia Britannica, and that's where we had to get our science from, and like and that's why a lot of the facts that I have in my head from my youth are like not even close to being accurate
Right.
because
And I mean, now I don't know if my child would ask me any questions anymore. Like, why is the sky blue? He could figure out on his own in 2 seconds. So I, yeah, I'm obsolete.
yeah,
But let's target the human heart. I'll get right to medicine. So he actually did a lot of work on the human heart. He wasn't just drawing what he saw, he was like rethinking how the heart worked. And he was right. Centuries before, you talked about that, centuries before modern medicine even caught up. We're talking 450 years. So early 16th century, excuse me, 1508, 1513, the prevailing medical theory, get this, and this was
Hmm.
passed down from the ancient Greeks, a physician named Galen, was that the liver was the center of the blood system, not the heart, the liver.
Yeah.
That was the prevailing theory. Leonardo looked at that and said, nope, nope, it's the heart. So he challenged that assumption, that premise, sort of like how any new technology, new advancement that comes about is based on a challenge of the conventional wisdom at that time. And everyone at first goes, that guy's a whack job. Well, those whack jobs often, dictate the course of history and, work toward our betterment. So he said, no, it's not the heart. He was the first to figure out the heart was a pump, the center of everything. So he did that. And then he didn't stop there though. This is really, really intense. The common belief at the time also, the heart had two chambers. That's what everyone thought. Two chambers, two ventricles, leave it at that. So Leonardo dissected the heart and he found, no, in fact, there's four. There's four. Two upper, two lower. And that's what we know today, right? And each one are performing their own unique function. How the hell did he figure this out? Well, we talked about in the last episode, advancement, progress based on the shoulders of giants, but also stands on the shoulders of the vulnerable. And in this case, the vulnerable was this pig. He would open up pigs whose hearts were still beating. Can you imagine? And that's how he observed. I don't know how else he would have figured this out. He observed the chambers opening and closing at different times. So that's how he determined that they perform different functions. And he reasoned that these chambers were separated by valves and membranes. That's why they were doing different things. Otherwise, why would they need to be separated at all? Why not just have one big chamber versus four?
Well,
Completely ahead of his time. Took 450 years, like I said, to confirm that his discovery of how the aortic valve in particular works. And talked about hydraulics. This is where his love for hydraulics comes in, fluid dynamics in particular. Obsessed with how liquid flow. He would stare at rivers for hours. He loved finding patterns. He was actually trying to create almost a theory of everything because he believed everything worked in harmony, everything connected to everything else. And so his goal was to make them all come together. So here's the question. After the heart pumps blood into the aorta, how does the valve close to prevent the blood from flowing back into the heart? The theory, and this was believed by most heart specialists until the 1960s, which is what? 40, 20, over 60 years ago.
yeah.
Before, they didn't find this out until then. So the valve, what the prevailing theory was until the 60s, was that the valve just gets pushed shut from above once the blood rushes into the aorta and starts to back up. So the blood just gets pushed down. That's it. And Leonardo said that's wrong. He argued that if the valve closed from pressure above, the blood would press down and crumple the membrane. So how could that work? It wouldn't seal properly. So there had to be something else going on. And so what he saw was this. When the blood is pumped upward from the heart through a triangle-shaped opening into the root of the aorta, it doesn't just flow straight up. The blood in the middle shoots up faster than the blood along the sides. That's basic fluid dynamics. I don't know anything about fluid dynamics. I had to do my homework. So the blood in the middle shoots up faster than the blood along the sides. I could get that.
Yeah.
And as it pours into the widened section of the aorta, it creates spiraling eddies, vortices, like a
Hmm.
vortex. And he loved spiraling eddies. He saw that in the water, the flow of a river, and now he saw it here. So these swirling flows, they pushed against the leaflets of the valves, spreading them out, then covering the opening. So the revolving blood beats against the sides of the three valve flaps and then closes them. The blood now cannot descend back into the heart. So I would call this a hydraulic masterpiece, right?
Yeah.
And he figured it out just by watching blood flow, sketching it in his notebook, and understanding the physics of fluid. So nobody believed him. Nobody. All right. And like you said, he wasn't widely published, none of his notebooks. And it wasn't until 60s, 40 years later, team of medical researchers, they used dyes and imaging, radiography to observe the blood flow. And guess what they did? Same thing, kind of. They built a transparent model of the aorta, filled it with water, and watched the flow patterns to see what happened. And they saw exactly what he described in 1508. The vortex, the swirling flow, the valve mechanism that positions itself directly, perfectly to snap shut at the slightest reverse flow. So he was right. And there's more. I believe 2014 was a team from Oxford, I think, that used MRI imaging to study blood flow in a living human. So now we're talking real time inside an actual person's aorta. What did they find? Leonardo's depiction of the vortices, the spiral flow drawn over 500 years ago, was strikingly precise. So not even just like
Wow.
conceptually accurate, it was proportionally accurate. So, what do we take away from this? What do we take away? He wasn't just a painter. He was a scientist, not who observed the world, relentless curiosity. He didn't have any of this modern technology,
Right.
MRI machines, advanced imaging, just his eyes, his hands, a pig heart, some water, and just an unshakable belief. And this is what's key, is that nature follows patterns. And that's what, dictated, his trajectory, his interests. And it took humanity half a millennium to confirm it. So that's him. That's him.
That's wild for a couple of different reasons, right? Like, I think it's wild that he was able to, some people are more drawn to patterns than others. So I think it's like great that he had that. But it's wild to me that he that he chose a pig of all the animals and of all like
Right.
the things that he could choose to study the anatomy of, and especially the anatomy of the heart, is a pig, because you know, porcine hearts are very closely linked to human hearts. That's why a lot of the research that we do for resuscitation and for, anything cardiac wise is on pigs. When they're first testing, they do it on pigs because the hearts are so similarly set up. So it's almost like he had an intuition even before anything
Yeah.
else. And
Right.
I mean, honestly, until I knew, I would have never ever thought that a pig heart was like a human heart. I remember when I first learned that and I was like, what? Like, because we used to dissect pig hearts. And I was like, oh, that's weird, whatever. And then they were like, nope, it's very much like a human heart. And I was like, oh, huh. So it's strange that he was able to kind of pick that
Yeah.
up and figure out all of how it worked just from that. Because as you were describing him watching, the water flowing, and seeing the eddies from the different waterways and the jet streams, I think of, like, when I was little and we'd be, because we would wash the car at home, right? And so you'd have a bucket of soapy water and you'd put the hose in and you could see that. You could see the water jetting out of the hose into like already water, and you could see the little eddies come up. And that's what I was thinking about. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, it all makes sense. And obviously I know how hearts work now, but but for him to kind of derive that and figure that out just from, staring at lakes and rivers and water flowing into each other is really, it, it's
Yeah.
mind-boggling to me. It's mind-boggling how smart people can be. And also, I made the dumb comment about, having an iPhone, but I do think about sometimes how much smarter we would be as humans if we didn't have all these things right at our fingertips.
I agree. I
If
agree.
we were able to expand our brains and think about things from, just go and do our own research and kind of come up with our own hypotheses and study them. Um,
I, I mean, think about that. Like, so that's a good point. Like, he wasn't like, I want to learn about the heart. So I'm going to look at the heart. I'm just going to look at this heart and I'm going to know this heart inside and out. But what enabled him to make these discoveries was just he didn't isolate that study. Like, it encompassed all his other interests and passions. And that really is informative,
right.
right? Having all that other natural input that led to these discoveries. So don't be narrow-minded when you study the heart. When you study anything, incorporate other topics that you might not think are essential or even connective, but they may in fact be. They may put that light bulb on in your head.
Well, and I will say one of the things that I found fascinating about Da Vinci too is on top of all of that, which, I just learned a whole lot from you, but he also, he did his own anatomy dissections live.
Ugh.
He kind of offered his own trainings, even though he was granted like a special dispensation, which I'm sure that's not the word they used back then, but because he was not medically trained. But because he had all of these drawings and he had all of these, thoughts and hypotheses, he was given a special permission, and he, probably because of connections and whatnot, but he did private dissections of pigs, and then he did get finally he got his first like human skull, and he dissected
Yeah.
a brain, which I think is like wild, and he just learned on the fly
Mhm.
and was like figuring things out. I mean, I just think it's just so wild how things happened and how it comes full circle that hypotheses from back, in the 80s or, 1500s are still ringing true today and or weren't even totally believed until, the 21st
Mhm.
century. It's
Mhm.
it's pretty bananas. So in essence, Leonardo da Vinci really took his visual and his artistic capabilities, and he took it from this, kind of a secretive place where he was learning and figuring out anatomy and other things at the same time with really limited knowledge. But he really helped to lay the groundwork for a scientific revolution in medicine and to spur on, different ways of thinking. And I encourage everyone. We talk about how there's, so many people in history that are looked at and thought of as crazy for having these harebrained ideas, but that's how we have innovations in medicine. And so if there's something that you have a hunch on and something that, is being currently researched and, people don't necessarily believe in it, but there's something that's drawing you to it, jump on board, look into it, think about it, start creating your own hypotheses, because this is how we get innovation in medicine. And this is how we push the bar and we save lives and increase outcomes from cardiac arrest and other events in medicine. So keep innovating, and we'll see you next time on Codeheads.
There are 1 million ways to die. We just wanna talk